What if the world's greatest war was never fought on the battlefield, but in the shadows, a war of whispers, codes, and betrayal, where one single secret could end the world? Welcome to Neo Historica A.I, where history comes alive through artificial intelligence. Today, we pull back the curtain on the untold secrets of the Cold War espionage. It was 1947. The world had barely caught its breath after the devastation of World War II, but already, a new kind of conflict was brewing. This war would be invisible, silent, and more dangerous than any that had come before. As the Iron Curtain descended and the Soviet Union tightened its grip on Eastern Europe, the United States responded by building an empire of intelligence. This pivotal moment saw the birth of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, created with a singular purpose: to counter the growing shadow cast by Stalin's ambitions. The epicenter of this new conflict was Berlin, a city split in half, a scar running through the heart of Europe. One side free, one side watching. Here, in these divided streets, the invisible war took shape. Agents from both sides moved like phantoms through the rubble and rebuilding. Every whispered conversation in a dimly lit cafe, every briefcase exchanged in a fleeting moment on a bridge, every flickering light in a distant window. Any of these could be a message, a signal, a lifeline, or a deadly trap. The stakes were impossibly high, and the players were masters of disguise and deception. This wasn't a war of armies, but of individuals, where the fate of nations could rest on a single piece of information, carefully passed from one hand to another in the dead of night. The Cold War had begun, and its first battles were being fought not with bombs but with secrets. Few wars in human history have been so profoundly defined by betrayal as the Cold War. It was an era where loyalties were commodities, and trust was the most dangerous vulnerability. Let's talk about the double agents among us, the men who walked the halls of power while serving the enemy. Meet Kim Philby. To his colleagues in British intelligence, he was a charming, brilliant, and trusted spy chief, a pillar of the establishment. But in secret, Philby was a dedicated communist, working for the Soviets since his university days. For decades, he held a position at the very heart of MI6, feeding Moscow the West's most guarded secrets. He betrayed networks, compromised operations, and sent countless agents to their deaths. His treachery was so deep, so complete, that for years, no one could believe he was the mole they were desperately hunting. Then, across the ocean, the rot was also setting in. Meet Aldrich Ames, a 31-year veteran of the CIA. Drowning in debt and personal problems, he walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. in 1985 and offered to sell America's secrets for cash. Over the next 9 years, he compromised more than 100 intelligence operations and betrayed at least a dozen Soviet sources working for the CIA, many of whom were executed. He was a ghost in plain sight, a mid-level analyst who lived a lavish lifestyle far beyond his salary, yet he evaded detection for years. And he wasn't alone. Robert Hansen, a senior agent in the FBI, was another devastating traitor. For over 2 decades, he sold highly classified national security information to the Soviet Union, and later, Russia. Driven by a complex mix of ego and financial need, Hansen used his position to access and deliver documents that crippled American intelligence efforts. He was the spy hunter who was himself a spy, a walking contradiction that exposed the deepest vulnerabilities within the U.S. intelligence community. These men weren't just spies. They were ghosts in their own agencies, their betrayal a wound that took decades to heal. The Cold War wasn't just a battle of wills between men and women. It was a relentless technological arms race fought in the shadows. This was a war of machines, of algorithms, of innovation pushed to its absolute limits. While spies met in secret alleys, another equally critical battle was being waged by brilliant minds in secure, windowless rooms. At Fort Meade, Maryland, the headquarters of the National Security Agency, American codebreakers worked around the clock. Their mission: to intercept and decipher the torrent of encrypted messages flowing out of the Kremlin. They were linguistic geniuses and mathematical wizards, searching for the slightest flaw, the smallest pattern in the enemy's codes. Thousands of miles away, their counterparts in Moscow, a legion of Soviet mathematicians and cryptographers, were doing the exact same thing. They engaged in a silent, relentless battle of encryption and deception, each side constantly creating new, more complex ciphers while desperately trying to crack the enemy's. A single broken code could reveal troop movements, political plans, or the identity of a spy. The technological race also took to the skies. The U-2 spy plane was a marvel of engineering, a sleek glider-like aircraft that could fly at 70,000 feet, far above the reach of Soviet fighters and anti-aircraft missiles. From this incredible altitude, its powerful cameras captured stunningly detailed photographs of forbidden territory, military bases, missile silos, and secret industrial sites. It gave the West a god's-eye view of its adversary, peeling back the layers of Soviet secrecy. And sometimes, the race for secrets went underground. Literally. The Berlin Tunnel operation was one of the most audacious espionage plots ever conceived. The CIA and Britain's MI6 dug a massive quarter-mile-long tunnel from an American sector of Berlin deep into the Soviet-occupied East. Their target, a major underground telephone cable hub used by the Soviet military. For nearly a year, they successfully tapped into these communications, listening to high-level conversations and gathering a treasure trove of intelligence. Every wiretap, every cipher, every secret photograph was another move on the global chessboard. It was a high-stakes game of innovation, where the next great technological breakthrough could tip the balance of power and decide the fate of the world. In October 1962, the world held its breath. For 13 terrifying days, humanity teetered on the very edge of nuclear extinction. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the Cold War's most dangerous moment, a standoff between two superpowers armed with enough atomic weapons to destroy civilization. But what many people don't know is that this apocalypse was averted in large part thanks to the shadow war of espionage. This is the story of the spy who saved the world, or rather, the spies. Armed with this human intelligence, the United States knew what to look for. U-2 spy planes were dispatched on high-altitude reconnaissance flights over Cuba. The photographs they brought back were undeniable, chilling proof. Soviet nuclear missile launch sites were under construction just 90 miles from American shores. The threat was real, and it was imminent. This combination of intelligence, from the brave double agent on the inside and the high-tech spy plane in the sky, was the crucial advantage for President John F. Kennedy. It gave him the time and the insight he needed to navigate the crisis. He knew exactly what weapons the Soviets had, their range, and their state of readiness. This allowed him to reject calls for an immediate military strike, which would have almost certainly triggered a full-scale nuclear war. Instead, he could confidently impose a naval quarantine around Cuba and engage in a high-stakes diplomatic negotiation. He could call Khrushchev's bluff because he was holding a handful of secrets. Espionage didn't just shape wars. In this case, it prevented one. For every act of betrayal that defined the Cold War, there was also an act of incredible courage, unseen, unrecognized, but world-saving. Oleg Penkovsky was eventually caught and executed, but his sacrifice gave humanity a future. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union didn't bring an end to the era of espionage. The spies were not silenced, their battleground simply changed. The invisible war continues today, transformed by technology and a new global landscape. The clandestine meetings in foggy parks have been replaced by encrypted messages sent across the dark web. The briefcases full of microfilm have given way to terabytes of stolen data on a flash drive. Today, the front lines are digital. The conflict has moved into cyberspace, a domain without borders where nations, corporations, and rogue groups clash in a constant low-level war of hacking and data theft. State-sponsored cyber warfare targets everything from critical infrastructure like power grids and financial systems to the theft of intellectual property and the manipulation of public opinion through social media. The spy of the 21st century is as likely to be a brilliant coder as a smooth-talking operative. The goal, however, remains the same: to acquire secrets, gain an advantage, and shape world events without firing a single shot. The whispers and codes of the Cold War have evolved into the algorithms and cyber attacks of our time. The great game never truly ends. It just finds a new board to play on. This is Neo Historica A.I., bringing the past to life, one story at a time. If you want to uncover more hidden histories, subscribe to our channel and never miss history reborn through AI. Thanks for watching.